Excellencies, dignitaries, experts, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining from different time zones. Uh, I welcome you all to this high level policy dialogue on accelerating SDG 6 achievements through cross sectoral partnerships, an official virtual side event of UN 2023 Water Conference organized by India Water Foundation in collaboration with World Water Council. It's a pleasure to have you all here, especially since today we are also commemorating India Water Foundation's founding day. Today is our birthday. The Sustainable Development Agenda aims to transform the world and eradicate poverty and achieve sustainable development by 2030 worldwide, ensuring that no one is left behind. This comprehensive and boldest agenda for humanity cannot be realized without increased and effective cooperation of all sectors at all levels. Water is at the core of sustainable development. Access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene is the most basic human need for health and well being. Some of the most important challenges around water include lack of access to clean sources and proper sanitation, efficient wastewater treatment, as well as building resilience mechanisms against floods and droughts. All of these are further intensified by climate change. Increasing global temperatures and unpredictable precipitation patterns intensified extreme weather events. The answer, as always, is proper management and partnerships. The SDG 17 is about partnerships and how they are critical for developing innovative solutions to meet SDG 6 and climate related challenges, especially those causing loss and damage in developing countries. Global cooperation involving a diversified stakeholder portfolio ranging from international finance institutions to private corporations to development aid organizations and NGOs help to deliver innovative solutions that build sustainable and resilient economies worldwide. To analyze the same, we have organized this event, bringing together leaders and experts from across sectors and multidimensional organizations to deliberate and serve as a space for discussing recommendations and gather support for joint action towards a more committed water action agenda. To initiate this session, I request Dr. Arvind Kumar, President India Water Foundation, to set up the tone for this event. Dr. Kumar is a strategist and key influencer in development sector with more than 28 years of experience as an author, columnist, water activist, and specializes in concepts like ecosystem-based adaptation, water energy food nexus, with specific emphasis on transversality approach of interlinkages between water, environment, and SDGs. Dr. Arvind Kumar, please.
Thank you, Seta. Excellency, Sri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat ji, Union Minister of Jal Shakti, Government of India, Ms. Ameda, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of UNESCAP, Mr. Liu Fauchon, President World Water Council, Mr. David Cooper, Acting Executive Secretary, CBD, Mr. Sambi Shah, UN Resident Coordinator, India, Mr. Satya Tripathi from GAS, and Mr. Jha from World Bank, and other dignitaries from FAO, JICA, and IUCN. Good evening, good morning to all. And as President India Water Foundation, I welcome all to this high-level policy dialogue. Today, we all assembled here to deliver on the subject of SDG 6, which is a foundation of life and livelihoods and a key to sustainable development. Successful implementation of SDG 6 goal as a whole will serve as a foundation for the achievement of most of the 17 sustainable development goals. Water is not just a sector, but development connector and as an economic indicator. It is a catalyst which links social, economic and environmental SDGs and is a gateway of bridging the gaps between the socio-economic and environmental pillar of sustainable development. Water is needed across all sectors to produce food, energy, combat climate change, provide healthy ecosystem services, and more. But with growing demand for water and mounting pressure from linked sector, water resources are severely stressed according to recent research carried out by UNEP if we see globally, a fifth of the uh, world's river basins are experiencing drastic fluctuations in water availability, and 2.3 billion people are living in countries categorized as water stressed, including 721 million in areas where the water situation is critical. Irrespective of the fact that water is the major driving force behind most of these goals, uh, it is fast became a pressing societal and geopolitical issue with the inadequate progress. And this is especially worrying that when considering the highly sectoral character of water goal. Coordination within the water sector and with other sectors need to be prioritized and strengthened. We have to identify opportunities to integrate water management into sectoral programs and planning processes, such as climate change, agriculture, poverty reduction, and establish formal coordination mechanism which with clear institutional mandates. Responsibilities and incentives for coordination, the governments across the world are accelerating actions towards achieving Goal 6, but it is not possible through government interventions alone. Honorable Minister of Jal Shakti, Government of India, shall highlight the various missions and initiatives started by Government of India, which were successful only because of partnerships and uh, participatory approach. Water, energy, agri-food, agriculture, environmental, and waste sector cannot be seen in silos. Well-designed pillars should be customized as per contemporary needs in an integrated manner, incorporating transversality approach by interlinking vertical linkages between water, food, energy nexus, and ecosystem-based adaptation approach with horizontal indicators like health, education, agriculture, gender, etc. And they must be weighed against efficiency, effectiveness, and equity. Broader partnerships between governments and international development organizations, private sector, civil society organizations should be given more space and scope in order to address regulatory and resource mobilization challenges. We have to facilitate the strategies to promote traditional wisdom, partnership between different sectors for comprehensive actions from the perspective of SDG 6, climate change, biodiversity loss, while also helping cities and communities do more with less. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for setting up the tone of the event. Now I call Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat Union Minister of Jal Shakti of the Government of India for his chair address, stressing on the achievements and progress made by India on SDG 6. Shri Shekhawat please.
Namaskar. I extend my congratulations to the India Water Foundation and the people associated with it that the foundation has been selected to organize the official side event on accelerating SDG 6 through cross-sectoral partnerships, a high-level policy dialogue in partnership with World Water Council. I am certain that this event will help in developing a clear understanding on the challenges of water conservation, access to clean water, and sanitation. I am also sure that these discussions, which are being held just before the United Nations 2023 Water Conference, will provide the world with innovative solutions in this direction. Dear friends, the Millennium Development Goals announced by the United Nations with an aim of building a better world set a time frame that concluded in the year 2050. After this, the United Nations put in place a new set of international development goals called the Sustainable Development Goals SDG. In the meaning of the United Nations General Assembly held in New York in 2015, 70 goals were set which were decided to be achieved by 2030. Our country is also among those nations that have agreed and signed to fulfill these goals set by the United Nations. In these Sustainable Development Goals, the number 6 target is related to Ministry of Jal Shakti, and it is in this context that I want to share my experience. Dear friends, recognizing the importance of clean water in building a healthy nation, our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji established a separate ministry of Jal Shakti and took several revolutionary decisions in this field. Concrete initiatives were taken in the direction of water conservation and water management. This effort of the government reflects its approach to look at the issues and concern related to water and sanitation in an integrated and holistic manner. I am happy to inform that our government has not only signed the United Nations resolution but has also tried to implement it with utmost zeal. In the last 8 years, our government has made sure that the benefits of various welfare schemes and projects reach people in the remotest part of the country. Dear friends, I am happy to share with you all today that issues like water and sanitation are at the top of the list of priorities of the government led by Modi ji. Our government, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister, is ensuring the people have access to clean water from taps all across the country, whether it is the inaccessible hilly region of Ladakh or the desert region of Rajasthan. Today, tap water is reaching every corner of India, and it is a truly extraordinary feat to ensure the situation in a short span of time. This could not have been achieved without a strong will and commitment. Dear friends, the Honorable Prime Minister announced the Jal Jeevan Mission on August 15, 2019 to ensure tap water connections in every rural household by 2024. Today, we have provided tap water connections to over 140 million households out of the country's 194 million. Despite the challenges posed by the pandemic, in less than 3 years, we successfully provided potable tap water to more than 82 million rural households. Dear friends, on the occasion of Mahatma Gandhiji's birth anniversary, much before the global commitment, Honorable Prime Minister announced Swachh Bharat Mission on 2nd October 2014. Soon this mission took the form of a people's movement. Rarely has a greater campaign for human behavior change been launched in the world. In a span of just 5 years, more than 100 million toilets were constructed in villages. Panchayats across the country declared themselves free from open defecation. This change proved to be very important from the point of view of children's health too. Dear friends, our focus is now on converting villages to open defecation free plus, which entails maintaining of ODF status at one end and on the other end to attain the complete sanitation status. Today, more than 200,000 villages have been declared as ODF plus. In achieving the ODF plus status, it is to be ensured that arrangements for solid and liquid waste management are made in the villages. In this direction, the second phase of the Swachh Bharat Mission Grami is now being implemented. The target is to declare all villages as ODF plus and attain the complete sanitation status by 2024-25. Dear friends, women empowerment is currently being discussed worldwide. If I talk about my country, under the leadership of Modi ji, the empowerment of women by the schemes related to Jal Jeevan Mission and Sanitation Mission is unique. I belong to Rajasthan, a desert state with a severe water shortage. Women have to go to remote areas with the pots on their head to fetch water for domestic requirements. But today, when I see pictures of smiling women filling water from tap in my home state and across the country, my heart fills with the immense satisfaction and pride. It is also worth mentioning that under the Jal Jeevan Mission, we have not only provided tap water in rural household, but we also empowered women by giving them 50% seats in the water and sanitation committees in every village. Water and sanitation decisions are now made through that these committees. This is a representation of new India, a changing India. Dear friends, I would like to share some similar Swachh Bharat mission experiences. Previously, a woman had no choice but to relieve herself in an unsafe environment away from home. Regardless of the weather, our Honorable Prime Minister decided to change this by resolving to provide access to toilet for every household in rural India. I am happy to share that we have succeeded in fulfilling the resolution. I want to conclude by saying that the world as a whole is currently going through a new stage of transition. The challenges we face are particularly large in the health sector. The pandemic has demonstrated the importance of improving our healthcare system and ensuring access to clean water and sanitation facilities to the entire world. This is the first decisive step in this direction. We have to work on this front with more commitment to ensure that no one is left behind. I extend my best wishes to India Water Foundation for conducting this timely deliberation, which I am confident will prove beneficial in accelerating the achievement of SDG 6 through cross sectoral partnerships. Thank you. Jai Hind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your address. As always, it was balanced and up to the mark in covering all the important initiatives and missions of the government. Our next speaker is Ms. Armida Alish Jabana, the Executive Secretary of UNESCAPE and the Under Secretary General of United Nations.
Excellencies, distinguished speakers, and participants, it is my pleasure to address the high-level policy dialogue on accelerating SDG 6 achievements through cross-sectoral partnership. This topic is highly relevant to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was adopted with integrated, interdisciplinary, and cross-sectoral approaches in mind. This policy dialogue has the objective of identifying solutions to strengthen the integration of different water sectors through improved governance and coordination. Unfortunately, our region is not on track to achieve SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, and we need to accelerate and reverse trends on all of the 8 targets of the goal. The Asia-Pacific region is home to only 36% of the world's water resources, making its per capita water availability the lowest in the world, and the need to use and manage water sustainably even more critical. By 2030, our region is projected to have a 40% supply-demand deficit as well, threatening human health, agricultural production, and economies. Water governance and institutional arrangements are also fragmented, and we need improved water management system that can be more efficient. We must accelerate the following actions to ensure safe drinking water and access to sanitation and hygiene for all. First, national water infrastructure projects and innovative technologies should be backed by strong political and financial commitment. Countries can engage more effectively with development banks and climate financing facilities to overcome funding shortages. Integrated water resource management should become the norm in all locations that can create synergies with climate goals such as agriculture and energy. Secondly, better and more granular data is needed to formulate enhanced policy actions to ensure equitable, sustainable, and clean water for all. It is well understood that effective use of data can improve water security and access to wash services, especially for vulnerable population groups, as well as transparency and accountability in the delivery of those services. Lastly, we require focus on stronger policy coherence, synergies, and legal frameworks for effective governance and capacity building. Excellencies, distinguished participants, increased stakeholder engagement and access to information in the water sector will improve inclusiveness and engagement with public institutions and policy processes. Institutions and capacity building should be strengthened to properly train and empower staffs. Next week, governments and multi-stakeholders from all corners of the world will congregate at the UN 2023 Water Conference in New York for the first time in nearly 50 years to commemorate World Water Day. The Water Action Agenda is expected to be transformative, inclusive, cross-sectoral, and action-oriented. Representatives of ESCAP members and associate members will also be attending the water conference in full force to confirm their political will. I ask each one of you to engage and galvanize support for this global effort. Let us all work together for action-oriented solutions. I wish you all a very successful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, especially for telling us about the trends in the region on SDG 6 progress and also about the importance of aggregated data and monitoring systems in SDG 6. Thank you so much. And now our next speaker is Mr. Loy Fochon, President of the World Water Council. He was President of the World Water Council from 2005 to 2012 and re-elected in 2018. He has directly contributed to the organization of various World Water Forums and now is spearheading the 10th World Water Forum in Indonesia, Bali. Mr. Focho, please.
Dear Dr. Arvind Kumar, dear friends of water, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to India Water Foundation for inviting us. Water is under attack. This is a simple way of expressing the multiple tensions pressing on the different uses of water. We have many reasons to be attentive and even concerned about the situation of water in the world. In some parts of this world, water can be hungry, it can be devastated and spread terror and death. In other places, water is lacking. Droughts that kill slowly, even more than flooding. Droughts are a threat for agriculture and food and ultimately causes migration. When water is available for humans, it's often polluted, sometimes even poisoned, causing waterborne disease and epidemics. It's not climate change that primarily affects the future of water. It's first and foremost population growth and all its consequences: excessive urbanization, coastal concentration, rising living standards, changing consumption patterns, mega pollution, and sometimes the destruction of ecosystems. All this has dramatic consequences for water, but also for air and soil. A recent study published in the Lancet states that there are 6 to 9 million deaths per year due to all types of pollution. This means that air, water, and soil pollutants kill 3 times as many people as AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. It means that we suffer 2 to 3 silent COVID almost every year. The answers to these difficulties, to these dangers, are multiple. The foundations of water policy need to be reviewed, and not just what we call the institutional organization of water. The objectives to be achieved are clear. We need to increase water supply and at the same time reduce water demand. Supply can only be increased and above all secured by diversifying the resources in a way that is, and I insist on this point, voluntary but respectful. Using the whole range of technological solutions, deep pumping, groundwater recharge, large-scale transfer, aquatic reserves, desalination, reuse of wastewater and others, with one imperative rule: providing water for humans as much as conserving water for nature. This is why the World Water Council has initiated work on the creation of an international observatory of alternative and non-conventional water and energy resources. As for water demand, it must be controlled, regulated, and sometimes even monitored. Obviously, by managing the various industrial, agricultural, and domestic uses more effectively and sustainably, tracking down leaks, chasing down waste, debating the value of water, which in all circumstances remain a public good and a common good. Let us also take advantage of the digital revolution to better save today's water for tomorrow's water. Managing supply and demand is to be conducted with prudence and consideration for the water heritage that we will leave to our children and their descendants. Everyone will understand that we must move from plundering water to sharing it, and to share it, we must protect it, safeguard it, respect it. In a word, to spare it, and it's what we want to say when we say spare water to share prosperity. And this is what so many of our planet's inhabitants expect from us: to provide concrete, sustainable, and supportive solutions that will enable everyone to have access to water in all places and under all circumstances. The challenges are high, especially, as you know, in the great country of India. Spare water for food, to produce food for this ever-growing global population, for these sprawling cities which, with their shanty towns, are reservoirs of shortage and poverty. And also spare water for health, to reduce the number of deaths due to waterborne diseases and to protect against pandemics. Spare water for education also, because we no longer want to admit that one school out of 3 in the world has neither water nor a toilet. And finally, the challenge of this century is to spare water for human beings as well as water for nature. Because biodiversity, ground and marine ecosystems also needs their water share, and because nature allows water to replenish and regenerate itself. These, dear friends of water, are the guidelines in which we must work to achieve the SDG 6 step by step, and then we will review in a few days at the UN conference in New York. Work to put political and public commitments on the table at the G20 in Delhi in September. Work to provide concrete answers at the 10th World Water Forum in Bali next year. We have the knowledge. We have the basis for good governance. We need more money for water. This requires real political will on every continent, in every country, in every urban and rural community. The message is clear to conclude by speaking out loud and clear: water is politics.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fauchon. You have presented a very exact picture of the excesses of water and the scarcity of water, and also about the commitments that all of us are making for the Water Action Agenda at New York. I now welcome Mr. Satya S. Tripathi, Secretary General, Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, a development economist, lawyer, and change maker with over 40 years of varied experience. Mr. Tripathi is also the Chancellor of Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences and Senior Distinguished Fellow on Innovative Finance at World Agroforestry Center. He was most recently the UN Assistant Secretary General, Head of New York Office at UN Environment. Mr. Tripathi, GASP is actually a very good example of partnerships, as it is an alliance between like-minded organizations from diverse backgrounds. How challenging is it to engage them, especially with differences as well as similarities in organizational mandate? If you can share with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Shweta, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's my distinct pleasure to be joining you today at this very important conversation, and I want to congratulate the India Water Foundation for taking this initiative and organizing this conversation. I mean, there's a global picture, and then there's, of course, the Indian picture, none of which is pretty. And I say this with a lot of respect for all those that are at the forefront, including the Honorable Minister who just spoke, and the Prime Minister of India, who's made it his mission to make sure that everybody gets potable water at home. Now, that's the macro situation in India, but the fact also remains that in global terms, India has 18% of the world's population with only 4% of the water resources. That, of course, is given to us by nature, and that also makes it even more challenging for us to make sure that, and as the president of the World Water Council rightly pointed out, that what we have is the boundaries of what we have is predicated by nature, but what we do within those boundaries is purely our responsibility. And water is not just, as my good friend David Cooper will point out, water is not just for the human of the species. There are 8 million species, and biodiversity works both ways. If we fail to protect our biodiverse planet in terms of its rich biodiversity, the quality of water will also drop precipitously, as it has over the last several decades. Water is a source of life, but it can also be a source of death, as we have seen with falling water tables. For an example, in many parts of India, as the water table drops, you see higher concentrations of arsenic or fluoride, which then leads to fluorosis. And so it is a double-edged sword. It sustains life in all its forms, but it also can take away life when we fail to protect it and nurture it and regenerate it. And that is why SDG 6 goes far beyond water and sanitation services, but it, in my opinion, it actually covers the entire water cycle, because it's not just a sector, but it's a connector from agriculture to forestry to the rainfall cycles to the cloud cover and the atmospheric ocean, as they call it, because the atmosphere can carry as much as 3 times of water as we have in the world's oceans. And so it is understanding the symbiotic relationships between all these different elements of nature, and then protecting and preserving them is essential. So when we stop thinking and we think in silos, and we think in our little boxes, that's when we do greater harm despite great intent. And so that's why if we fail to reach the 2030 agenda, we are not only endangering the success of many other sectors and global agendas, but we also put not just the future of humanity at risk, but also that of all the species and the biodiversity in our planet, which we also know as the web of life. Now, there have been many forums that have identified these challenges, formulated recommendations, and also acknowledged the need for action to achieve water-related goals and targets. But I think, among all the 17 SDGs, this is the most critical SDG because it accentuates poverty. As the Honorable Minister rightly pointed out, he's from the state of Rajasthan. And as a social scientist, I have seen it innumerable times and talked about it, that it is unthinkable that in the 21st century, we have women walking 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers to fetch a pot of water for their families. And unfortunately, it falls on women and actually even little girls and boys to do these chores because others are too busy trying to earn bread for their families. So if we achieve SDG 6, it has ramification way beyond the boundaries of what we understand as SDG 6. And in that context, responding to your question, Shweta, partnerships are extremely important. We all have some gifts and some abilities, some resources, and I'm talking in terms of organizations, not individuals, whether it is multilateral development banks like the World Bank or ADB and others, or development finance institutions such as JICA and others. The fact remains the same, that we need to collaborate more effectively across sectors. We need to bring into fore the innovations that are coming out, either from tiny organizations in some farthest corner of the world, or from big corporations, not treat one or the other as untouchables, because sometimes we get so caught on in our own rhetoric that we refuse to understand that there are bigger opportunities waiting to be tapped, waiting to be explored, understood, and tapped for humanity. And then, of course, data acquisition and monitoring is extremely essential. And a lot of in the NGO world, a lot of the data that is captured never gets synthesized across the board. Cross-validation, I mean, there are some NGOs that are collaborating effectively, but most of them don't because it's a very competitive environment. We all need our resources to make good on the promises we make to our donors. So we are always worried that if we share, whether it is data or ideas, then what does it do to our bottom line? And we have to find a way that we collaborate way more effectively than we have so far, and especially in the water sector, because without data accountability and transparency, it is impossible to foster a healthy debate. That will then inform policymaking and decision making. The Honorable Minister talked about all the great things that India is doing, but I'm sure he will greatly benefit and he'll welcome a certain level of transparency and cross-validation of all the information that reaches him, so that then he's able to make the kind of decisions that not only serves the 1.4 billion people of India, but also sets up India as a great example of ideas and accomplishments that others can learn from and benefit from. And last but not the least, the whole idea about respecting and rescuing and revaluing traditional knowledge. And India is home to a large segment of what the world calls indigenous people, and we in India call them the tribal communities. And I have the privilege of leading the Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences as the Chancellor. And I learn every day. Every time I talk to children, the 60,000 children that live and study there, that the kind of wisdom they have in terms of their own observations of what happens in their immediate habitat, whether it is a forest habitat, either on the margins of the forest or deep within the forest domains, is extraordinary. And so we need to tap into that, and we revalue traditional knowledge while incorporating modern technologies at the same time, so that we link native communities in the process of development and strengthening of capacities and forging effective partnerships. In the absence of that, it will be a lot of good conversation with not much to really draw from and benefit from. So with that, I would like to end by saying that we are at a very crucial time in our Earth's history, especially brought upon ourselves by humanity within the last 100 years. And we really need to find the resources. Sustainable finance can play a big role. We have to make a business case, not as in a profit making, but profit has to be seen as public profits, not private profits and public losses, but it has to be seen as private investments and public profits, while the private investments also make some reasonable amounts of money, building these partnerships. And I know the World Bank is doing a lot in this space. We at GASP are also working with a large number of stakeholders in the space. I'm myself in Jakarta at this time, and over this week, I'll be meeting numerous ministers and senior government officials to see how we can bring the best of possibilities to Indonesia, both in the water sector, in plastics, in recycling, and everything else, so that all adds into how we protect water and make it available to those that need it the most in a qualitative manner, not just quantity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Tripathi. You have comprehensively brought together everything, whatever we were supposed to discuss during this meeting. I think that's your experience that has, enhanced this event completely. And of course, I agree with you on the transparency and data. That is very important, because if we have proper data, only then we'll be able to make proper policies. Our next speaker is Mr. Shombi Shah, UN Resident Coordinator for India. He has devoted more than 25 years of his career to promoting inclusive and sustainable development internationally. He is a published author of works in health economics, as well as a nominee for the UNDP Administrators Award. He would highlight how UN as a whole is engaging with multi-sector, especially in context of SDG 6. Mr. Shah, please.
Friends, colleagues in India and around the world, namaste, greetings from Delhi. It is an honor to address this UN Water Conference Policy Dialogue. I wish to thank the India Water Foundation and World Water Council for organizing this session and for choosing the critical and timely theme of accelerating SDG 6 through partnerships. And thanks to all of you, everyone, for your important participation today. Colleagues, the centrality of water, sanitation, and hygiene to public health and sustainable development cannot be overemphasized. Yet this most vital of resources is under tremendous pressure globally, and certainly also here in India. It's 16% of the world's population, but only 4% of its freshwater resources. As we face competing interests for water across the globe, from rapidly growing household demand and urbanization to agriculture, often still dependent on inefficient irrigation and wasteful industrial practices, all of these are driving the overexploitation of groundwater, water scarcity, and environmental degradation. And this comes against the backdrop of the triple planetary crisis and climate change. Here in South Asia, we see the monsoon patterns and Himalayan ecosystems upon which billions rely being increasingly disrupted, leading to drought and flooding alike. Friends, the good news here is that India's extensive investments, as well as cross-sectoral partnerships, are rapidly changing lives and generating a wealth of best practices. High-impact flagship programs like Swachh Bharat and the Jal Jeevan missions, which are unprecedented in their vision and scope, have seen over 500 million people provided with access to toilet facilities in the last 7 years, and over 80 million households provided with new tap connections in just the last 3. In 2019, only 17% of households had access to safe drinking water. This number has now risen to 59% and is targeted to reach everyone by next year. The public investment to achieve these results has been massive. The The Clean India mission has delivered a budget of approximately $40 billion. And now the Ministry of Jal Shakti has foreseen another $40 billion to provide piped water supply to every household in the country. These are among the biggest investments in water and sanitation infrastructure that the world has ever seen. Cross-sectoral partnerships have already made a significant positive impact on the water and sanitation sector in India. The President of the UN General Assembly, Saba Karosi, who has hailed this water conference as the Paris moment for water, was inspired on his recent visit to India by an innovative initiative in Bangalore to provide treated municipal wastewater at scale to farming communities in surrounding areas, driving agricultural sustainability, village incomes, and recovering water tables. The national water policy underscores the need to attract private sector into every stage of the water project life cycle. Public-private partnerships in cities like Hyderabad, Nagpur, and Bangalore, as well as in rural areas, have improved service delivery, quality, and reduced the financial burden on municipal governments for infrastructure. While broad partnerships across government, civil society, and academia continue to bring knowledge and innovation to the table, much innovation is also coming from the ground up across the country. I was privileged to visit the village of Piplantri in rural Rajasthan, for example, where the community has reversed years of environmental degradation and groundwater depletion, while also promoting gender equality through a self-proclaimed eco-feminist approach. Piplantri is now a model village, and its efforts to ensure water conservation, reforestation, and measures to support the girl child have inspired many others. And cross-sectoral partnerships within government have allowed for the coordination of efforts and resource sharing. For example, in the central government, the Department of Water Resources and Drinking Water and Sanitation has been brought under a unified Ministry of Jal Shakti, which has collaborated with the Ministry of Education towards safe wash in schools, with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs to provide basic services like water supply and sanitation in urban areas, and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare towards effective wash in healthcare facilities. We in the UN country team agencies here on the ground have been privileged partners with India's national missions to strengthen alignment with SDG 6 and help ensure leaving no one behind, while we increasingly help identify and share Indian best practices at the global level. Colleagues, to conclude, in the words of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, water and sanitation must be considered a basic human right for all people, no matter who they are or where they live. And India is playing an increasingly crucial, growing role in driving both this progress at home and globally to ensure these rights and SDGs, and offering support to other countries through South-South cooperation, such as the India-UN Development Partnership Fund. And India's timely G20 presidency, which has placed SDG acceleration, a just green transition, digital public goods, women-led development as top priorities, along with India's Global Lifestyles for the Environment, or LIFE initiative, which the UN Secretary General was pleased to join Prime Minister Modi in launching here last year. All of these are providing important opportunities to advance the global goals on WASH, as well as the entire 2030 agenda. India's G20 presidency, which I see as an SDG 20 presidency, will bring critical momentum to the SDG summit, a strategic handshake just a few days later, giving cause for optimism in this time of polycrisis. I wish you all an excellent session. Thank you very much. Bahat Dhanyavad.
Thank you, Mr. Shombi Sharp, for your kind words and putting a picture of UN partnership with the government of India and how they are taking it ahead, and also about G20 initiatives. Our next speaker is Mr. Saroj Kumar Jha, Global Director for the World Bank Group's Water Global Practice. Mr. Jha supports an integrated approach to water security and inclusive service delivery, accelerating climate action and food security through Bank's global water strategy, and providing policy advice and operational support in response to specific country needs. Mr. Jha, with a portfolio of water investments of almost US 30 billion, How uniquely is the Water GP positioned to address financial partnerships while amplifying the impact of leading through technical assistance on the ground? Can you please elaborate it on this in your opening remarks? You're muted, Mr. Jha.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, now we can.
Great. Thank you very much, Shwetaji, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to wish the India Water Foundation a very happy 15th anniversary. I wasn't aware that this was the occasion. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this on behalf of the World Bank Group. Let me make a couple of remarks because I've heard many speakers talk about the why and what part of it. I will focus more on the how of the financing. So as you said, the World Bank currently has a portfolio of about $30 billion roughly mapped to water projects. This includes irrigation, water supply, sanitation, water resource management, etc. And then you have another $30 billion projects which are not mapped to water, but this is in the other ministries, which is actually one of the points you have raised as part of the cross-sectoral partnerships, which is important for water sector. Because you have water projects being done by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment, and many other ministries, which is great. But all that you need is a comprehensive national water resource management strategy, which looks at how the different parts of the government come together in addressing the entire water resource management agenda. And this is an area where increasingly the World Bank is trying to emphasize more and more in our country dialogue, because most countries, the water sector work is very fragmented across ministries at the national level, but also at the subnational level. But this is to stress that there is a very large portfolio in the World Bank Group. This is definitely very much part of our priority going forward. Linked to this is also the broader financing needs in the context of SDG 6. So annually, currently we have a financing gap of about $130 billion annually, going up to all the way to 2030. At the current scale of financing coming from government and all the ODS sources, which is bilateral, multilaterals, including MDBs, loans, concessional loans and grants, you still have a gap of about $130 billion roughly annually. And the only way you can achieve universal access, if you're able to bring this additional resources, and please remember, these additional resources are only to achieve basic water supply and basic sanitation. This is not even the SDG standard, which is safely managed water supply and safely managed sanitation. But that the number is even higher. So the question is, how can we get more money on the table? Where will that money come from? What will it take for us to bring that additional resources? An answer to all this lies actually in a comprehensive reform of the water sector, in terms of national water policies, in terms of the institutions we need to deliver better quality of water services, and the regulations we need at different levels of managing the water sector. Most of that is non-existent in many of the countries where we work. And in some countries, this is even the first generation of reforms that you need to implement in the water sector, which is for many years has been seen as a social agenda. It is, of course, a social agenda, but it is also an economic issue. It is also an issue, that environmental issue, that point many speakers made before. So there is a need for bringing the social, economic, and political and environmental dimension in understanding and acting on water-related issues. So as part of this thinking, we are at the UN conference next week. The World Bank, together with all the other multilateral development banks, will launch a process for scaling financing for water, which essentially means that we will work with all the MDBs together to use our resources to catalyze more private financing in the water sector: irrigation, agriculture, water supply and sanitation, industrial wastewater treatment, recycle, reuse. And there are many areas. If you unpack the water sector, there are areas where businesses can come in and make money. And there you do not need to spend scarce public financing. So that's my first point. The second point is that spending public finances wisely. It is not that the governments are not spending money. I mean, I always hear this, that governments need to spend more money. I heard one speaker talk about it, we need more money. Many governments, on an average, of course, you spend what 2% of GDP is spent on water. But guess what? 38% of the total money provided in the budget on an average globally remains unspent at the end of the fiscal year. So most institutions, agencies also lack the capacity for proper planning and execution of water projects. And this is often the case in the water utilities and water institutions at large in the countries where we work. So there is a need for more capacity in the institutions where they operate. And this is where the World Bank's technical assistance, together with other bilaterals and multilaterals, is focused right now in building the capacity of the national and subnational institutions to be able to plan better and to have more bankable projects and to have better monitoring and evaluation systems to see how the projects are implemented. And my last point is something which wasn't raised before, although I think one speaker made that point, is that water is essential for economic growth. Water is essential for job creation. And we, the water people, are very comfortable talking about why water is so important within our own community. And I don't think we have done enough to make an economic case. That there can be no growth without water. There will be no food security without water. There will be no energy transition without water. There will be no job creation without water. There will be no industry without water. We got to make that case very centrally. And we go out of our comfort zone and start engaging the ministries of planning, the Niti Aayog types, and make our case. But for that, we need very rigorous qualitative and quantitative analytical work to demonstrate why water is essential for economic growth. And later this year, the World Bank will publish first ever global report on water and economy, which will be either an annual or a biannual feature of the World Bank report, where we will make this connection as to why water is essential for growth and for competitiveness of the economies. And I hope that will be a useful input also into the conference next week. Let me stop here and hand over back to you, Shwetaji.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jha. We'll continue with you later as well. And I really in alignment with what you've said about that, are we doing enough? We have been speaking too much and doing very less. And this is what the New York 2030 Water Conference is all about. Now I request Dr. David Cooper, Acting Executive Secretary of the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, to speak on the symbiotic relation between biodiversity, water, and climate. Mr. Cooper has more than 30 years of experience in environmental and agricultural science and policy and international negotiations, including more than 20 years with the CADD. Mr. Cooper, please.
Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to speak at this high-level policy dialogue on accelerating SDG 6 achievements through cross-sectoral partnerships. Target 6.6 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development aims to protect and restore water-related ecosystems, including mountains, forests, wetlands, rivers, aquifers, and lakes. Achieving this target will have far-reaching positive impacts on the whole of SDG 6 and on the other Sustainable Development Goals. We know that the planet's water cycle relies on biodiversity. Water-related ecosystems provide essential ecosystem functions and services for people and for flora and fauna. They allow us to grow food and fibre, and they provide habitats for fish species that feed hundreds of millions of people worldwide, including indigenous peoples and local communities. They are critical to guaranteeing better nutrition and human health. They also provide benefits such as pollution and nutrient absorption and recycling, flood management, drinking water supply, carbon sequestration, and resilience against the impacts of natural catastrophes and climate change. But biodiversity in these ecosystems is declining faster than at any time in human history. Land use change has had the largest negative impact on these ecosystems, with additional impacts from water extraction, over-exploitation, pollution, climate change, and invasive species. Many freshwater and coastal ecosystems are threatened by eutrophication. This is due to excess runoff of soil and nutrients from land, especially from agricultural areas and degraded ecosystems. Ongoing deforestation and ecosystem degradation is already disrupting regional rainfall patterns. The effects could be catastrophic if these trends are not reversed. Even without these additional threats, by 2050, 1.8 billion people are estimated to live under conditions of regional water stress. 1.8 billion people. We can't afford to just stand idly by. We must act. Ladies and gentlemen, with the recent adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in December 2022, a clear and ambitious pathway forward has been charted to halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity, and by 2030, to put nature on a path to recovery for the benefit of all people and the planet. This framework can transform our relationship with biodiversity in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Each of the 23 targets of the framework are relevant to water. It is a framework for action, but it is only a framework. Now we need the action. For example, action is needed on targets 1, 2, and 3 to protect and restore critical habitats. Action is needed on targets 6 and 7 to tackle pollution and the impacts of invasive alien species. Target 7 specifically calls for excess nutrients lost to the environment to be halved by 2030. Implementation of the framework requires action by the whole of government and the whole of society. The productive sectors, including the food and agricultural sectors, need to adopt sustainable practices to increase productivity while conserving biodiversity and ecosystem services. Particularly, Target 10 aims to ensure that areas under agriculture, aquaculture, fisheries and forestry are managed sustainably. Target 14 calls for the values of biodiversity, including water-related values, to be integrated into policies across all government ministries, economic sectors, and all facets of society. Target 15 requires businesses to assess and disclose their dependencies and impacts on biodiversity, so that negative impacts can be progressively reduced. Above all, these actions must be taken while ensuring the full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, and in a gender-responsive way, in line with targets 22 and 23. Ladies and gentlemen, the successful implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework will support the Water Action Agenda and SDG 6. But to accelerate the progress, we need to encourage this conversation beyond our constituencies. The 2023 UN Water Conference is an opportunity to leverage strong cross-sectoral synergies and actions. Cross-sectoral partnerships are fundamental. We need dialogues across sectors to build coherent policies and programs. We need to engage policymakers at all levels, all productive sectors, women and men, Indigenous peoples and local communities, as well as consumers. We must urgently halt biodiversity loss and restore our water-related ecosystems. Together, we can achieve all the Sustainable Development Goals and ultimately build a future where we all live in harmony with nature. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper, and you've thrown light on the ecosystem services and how the biodiversity is affected by disturbed water ecosystems at all levels. Thank you so much for your address. Our next speaker is Mr. Rohiza Jean Boroto, who's a Senior Land and Water Officer at FAO. He develops and manages the global framework on water scarcity in agriculture in the context of climate change, a partnership established in April 2017 and hosted by FAO. My question to Mr. Boroto is, The water we eat daily through the food we consume is much more than what we drink. With growing population to feed, more agriculture is needed, and agriculture is both a major cause and casualty of water scarcity. What mechanisms can be recommended to promote intersectoral cooperation from the most basic local level, which can be scaled on national and regional levels to achieve food security without compromising on water security? Mr. Ruiza, the floor is yours, please. You're muted. Can you please unmute?
Sorry. Thank you very much for the opportunity to intervene in this dialogue. I represent the FAO, and within FAO, I manage the Global Framework on Water Scarcity in Agriculture. To respond to your question, as we have heard it from various speakers this morning, or this afternoon rather, or this evening, depending on where we are. No, agriculture is one of the users of water. And agriculture actually accounts for more than 70% of freshwater abstractions. And we heard that the world population is increasing, so the world population needs to be fed. Because it needs to be fed, it means that more water is needed. If that water is needed, it's at the expense of other sectors, industries and domestic consumption. So in order to achieve that balance, because the water that we have to use is not going to increase, on the contrary, it becomes less and less predictable with climate change. We need to be more resourceful. So FAO, which promotes food and agriculture, relies a lot on the availability of water resources, not FAO, but all the countries. And very often in our conversation around climate change, we do not appreciate enough that water is key to food production. Even in our mandate as FAO, our member countries are questioning what is the role of water. But when we came into existence, we were not under the same pressures as today. Today, we realize that in order to feed the world population, we need to manage our water in the most judicious manner. So FAO alone does not have the capacity to do that. We felt it was critical to engage other sectors, engage them to bring them to the table so that together we can start finding the proper solutions. The solutions that then we propose, actually, if you think about it, water speaks, yes, to SDG 6, but from our mandate as FAO, water speaks to food security, ending hunger, SDG 2. It speaks to ending poverty. It speaks to partnership. It speaks to climate change, SDG 13, and so forth. So in fact, water, so being central to SDG 6, cannot be ignored. It's key to achieving all the other SDGs, and therefore the conversation, this conversation today is necessary. Partnerships are essentially, are important. We cannot afford to work in silos. Within this global framework on water scarcity in agriculture that was launched at COP21 in Marrakech in Morocco in 2016, FAO felt that it was important to bring everyone to the table. And so many countries came on board, many UN agencies, mostly research institutions, private sector organizations, and the NGOs. And in order to proceed, we felt that there were low-hanging fruits on which we could focus our attention. So one such fruit, for example, in irrigation, you can improve, we heard it, agriculture is extremely inefficient in using water. So we can improve our ways of irrigating. We can be resourceful in making sure that each drop produces more food. But then with the mandate to be responsible for the well-being of people, then we not only want to produce more food per crop, but we need to produce more nutritious food per crop. And that brings the nutrition dimension, that brings the health dimension. With climate change, we are affected more and more by salinity, increasing salinity, specifically in small island developing states, coastal countries. And yet saline agriculture offers an opportunity. It's not only about desalination, but it's also about halophytes, crops that are resistant to salinity and crops that can at the same time actually be nutritious. It's about coping with droughts. It's about coping with migration. If you allow water to be available to population when they are faced with climate change, not only you give them some stability, but you help them to stay at home and be more resilient at home. So this is what we are busy doing. We've been in existence in a few years. We met last month in Praia, Capo Verde. We were close to 300 people physically and 1,500 virtually. We agreed to expand our scope of work. Traditionally, we work on the areas that I mentioned, nutrition, sustainable agriculture, water use, saline agriculture, droughts, water and migration, a financing mechanism actually. But now we feel that as the world is evolving, digital agriculture cannot be ignored. Digital agriculture is part of the solution. The safe reuse of wastewater for agriculture and dealing with water quality is part of the equation. The water, energy, and food nexus. When you speak, for example, about desalination, you depend a lot on energy. When we abstract groundwater, we depend more and more on solar power energy, of which the cost is diminishing. One key important aspect that we felt was important beyond the technical dimension is actually the political dimension to mobilize all countries. So what we have decided is that we are going to invite all countries to join this partnership movement so that each country plays a role. We are not going to have a better situation than yesterday. Water scarcity is going to become worse with time, and it will affect all countries, either through droughts, either through floods actually, but also through temporal variations, because climate change manifests itself through more extremes in floods, more extremes in droughts. And you cannot predict no more when it's going to rain compared to when it used to be in the past. So we are inviting all countries to join this movement, and we hope that that will be the case. Next week, we'll have also a side event in the UN where we'll continue also to promote this activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Boroto, for highlighting the undeniable linkage between water security and food security. And of course, also highlighting one point is how wastewater can be used for agriculture purposes. So after treatment, of course. So thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Mr. June Patanabe, who is a senior representative for JICA India office and is handling projects in water, forestry, agriculture, and power sector, and is also involved with Northeastern region operations. Mr. Watanabe, water, agriculture, forestry, and power cannot be seen in silos and are deeply connected. JICA is striving to enhance collaboration with private sector and NGOs in diverse fields to deepen the impact of JICA's initiatives in India. Can you articulate, Mr. Watanabe, the kind of support JICA provides to countries, especially in India, and forge partnerships?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank India Water Foundation to invite JICA India to this very important side event. It is my honor to attend the high-level policy dialogue. I'd like to explain JICA India's activities as materials for our discussion. The Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, is the largest bilateral donor for India. It has been actively assisting for economic growth, poverty reduction, and environmental conservation through concessional loans, technical cooperation, grant aid, and partnerships with the private sector. Over the years, JICA has been instrumental to facilitate development of many sectors, including transportation, energy, forestry, agriculture, health, as well as water and sanitation, among others. JICA has been supporting the development of India's water and sanitation sector by addressing water quality and scarcity issues, and towards contributing to the Indian government efforts in achieving the targets of SDG 6. Our support to this sector in India mainly consists of ODA loans of over 800 billion Japanese yen and 4 grant projects plus 15 technical cooperation projects. These projects are implemented around the country, including Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Assam, Odisha, Goa, Punjab, Rajasthan, Delhi, etc. With our projects, water supply has catered to approximately 30 million people, and 15 million people have received access to sanitation. In infra development, JICA showcases the latest technologies in water and sewage treatment plant, equitable and continuous water supply distribution systems, and the introduction of SCADA and GIS and MIS, which are used for non-revenue water reduction. Our projects are contributing not only to infra development, but also to capacity building of the local agencies. For example, in order to raise the financial sustainability of water bodies, technical cooperation was provided to such cities as Delhi and Goa, in addition to introduction of SCADA and GIS. Establishment of water and sanitation entities responsible for efficient service deliveries to the public are also promoted under our projects. JICA also supports social development activities together with infra development in the Indian context, such as construction or improvement of community toilets, dhobi ghats and bathing ghats, and crematoria by reflecting the voices of the communities. In addition, since the COVID period, JICA has been implementing the Aaj Adat campaign. In the early 2021, JICA launched the Aaj Adat campaign, meaning Good Habits campaign, to spread various hygienic practices among the population in India. The campaign encouraged consistent and appropriate hand washing techniques, nail cleaning, and other hygiene practices. We utilized donated products by Japanese private companies like soap, a nail clipper, and a portable washing item, as well as YouTube videos collaborating with Japanese famous characters of Hello Kitty and Kumamon. By doing so, JICA is reaching out to the targeted children to sensitize good habits to protect them from viruses that cause infectious diseases, including the COVID-19. These are the outline of the recent JICA supports and activities in India. It is true that to meet tremendous investment needs of this sector in India, it requires not only government funds, but donor financing and private financing for future infra development. But I have to say that the capacity of the relevant institutions needs to be enhanced to absorb those externally financed projects in terms of international bidding principles, project management, including land acquisition and coordination with other relevant utility authorization, technical knowledge in operation and maintenance, etc. To achieve SDG 6, partnership with the government, local community, civil society, and private sectors are crucial to bring about the impact in society. JICA India will continue working for water and sanitation sector in India by closely coordinating with those stakeholders. This is the end of my explanation. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Watande, for very crisply putting how JICA India is supporting India in technical and ODA support and what are the interventions they have been doing. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Mr. Vishwaranjan Sinha. Mr. Sinha is Program Officer, Water and Wetlands, South Asia, IUCN Asia Regional Office in Bangkok, with more than 12 years of experience working on regional water governance issue in the Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna and Mekong region. Mr. Sinha, first of all, thank you patiently for waiting for your turn. And my question to you is, we have all been speaking about devaluing traditional knowledge and incorporating modern technologies as well at the same time. Can you please elaborate on how to assertively link native communities in the process of development, strengthening of communities and capacities, and forging effective partnerships? Because wetlands are also means of livelihoods for these communities and are degrading at an alarming rate. So, what exactly IUCN is doing, this department of IUCN is doing specifically in relating to indigenous communities who are generally considered the saviors and protectors of wetlands?
Thank you, Shweta. So thanks for inviting me for this very important high-level policy dialogue. And my work area is a lot related to the governance of shared water resources or shared rivers in South Asia, which also includes a lot of wetlands and the indigenous community. So one of the ways that we try to engage indigenous communities in water management is through the application of nature-based solutions. So quickly, talking about IUCN's role in sustainable development, we have been part of the high-level political forum on sustainable development, and our engagement aims to provide reliable science to assist governments and other actors in tracking progress towards the meeting of SDGs, particularly highlighting the nature's role in sustainable development goal. Speaking about Asia, we have seen that it is one of the least, one of the most water scarce region in the world, with 47% of the global freshwater resources, but 65% of the population. And this has put a tremendous pressure on and challenges in terms of long-term peace and stability in the specifically talking about wetlands, the region, we know that 80% of the wetlands in the region is threatened with conversion to other land uses. This despite the fact that wetlands could be a very good and effective measure in terms of fighting climate change in the region. There is also issues around lack of holistic planning in hydropower and linear infrastructure development, which is impacting the wetlands and also fish migration and water sediments and flow. So now just talking about what is happening in shared river basins like Ganga, Brahmaputra, and Mekong. We have seen that there is a challenge because of the absence of cooperation framework. Most of the shared river basin provide ecosystem services to more than 1 billion people in Asia. So like Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna, Mekong, Indus, all these big river basins which are shared by different countries. However, most of these basins have a lack of holistic management framework, which hinders the development of intersectoral management approaches, engagement of local indigenous community in the planning and implementation of shared water resource governance issues, including conservation of the wetlands. So just to share with everyone, the target 6.5, particularly if we talk about the 6.5.2, which is about how much IWRM has been implemented in shared river basin, Asia is one of the worst performing. In many cases, there is absence of data on how much it has been implemented in shared river basins, and this has put more than 1 billion people at risk. In Asia, when we talk about cooperative management framework, so basically what I'm trying to emphasize here is the role of law and agreements in ensuring cross-sectoral coordination and engagement of local communities and indigenous communities. So one example, we see that most of there are agreements on shared river basin in South Asia, but they treat water simply as a resource, focusing on sharing of volumes of water rather than coordinated management to enhance the shared ecosystem benefits. Rarely there is consideration given to management of river basin as a whole, or the river as a living complex ecosystems, because there are different challenges linked to a same basin and a different management system and the different countries, different states. So this leads to the challenges linked to coordination. To convince the governments and stakeholders IUCN has been working on water management programs at global, regional, and national levels. And we have developed a lot of toolkits around international water law, benefit sharing, training modules with more than 80 partner organizations to help a stakeholder develop effective agreements to manage their water resources in efficient and equitable manner. More we work on shared water resources in Asia, more we have come to appreciate the centrality of the international water law principles and agreements. With the projected intensification of demands on water and climate change, an agreement that can withstand the vagaries of changing policies and politics requires a stronger legal basis and clear dispute resolution mechanism. One example I would like to cite here is from the Mekong region. The Mekong region has a river agreement, Mekong River Agreement, and a Mekong River Commission established in 1995 to support sustainable and cooperative management of the Mekong River basins, basically the lower Mekong River basin. However, even with these institutions and agreement, lower Mekong countries like Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam are struggling to reconcile their increasingly divergent interests, particularly over hydropower development. Despite numerous meetings, there has been no consensus on what is the best way to develop hydropowers in the region. This reflects, in part, a legal gap and ambiguities in the Mekong River Agreement. To address this, Vietnam in 2014 ratified the UN Water Courses Convention. This was a significant development in terms of water diplomacy, as the ratification of the UN Water Convention has gone far beyond just legal discourse, but it has introduced new dialogue on broader sustainable management of the shared river basins. Just to add that IUCN's experience in strengthening legal basis for transboundary water cooperation has also provoked debate over shared natural resources, not just water, but how countries can cooperate to expand this ecosystem services, basically the water services, which is going to be very scarce in future. Law and agreement can provide the foundation for a lasting cooperation as it follows and upholds the principles of inclusivity, equity, no harm, reasonable use of resources, and protection of ecosystem services. We also have to see the need for stronger law and agreements in dealing with emerging issues. Recent studies have highlighted that 10 of most of the most polluted rivers in terms of plastic pollution and discharge are in Asia. Yangtze is one example, which alone carries 1.5 tons of plastic a year. This is a serious issue and needs urgent attention. And we are, as IUCN Asia, are also working on, dealing with these issues. And here also we see a lot of role for international water law and conventions and principles like no harm, ecosystem conservation in terms of better managing the plastic issue jointly by the countries. Finally, I would like to highlight two things which are important when we talk about accelerating SDG 6.5 achievements. It's about increased investment in water, energy, food, and environment nexus studies. We have seen that data on these interlinkages are kind of missing, or they are not in a form that can be used for policy and planning processes. So therefore, there is a need for a leafy nexus approach in terms of identification of trade-offs among different stakeholders on what kind of water allocation and use will support better coordination and conflict resolution. And finally, also increased investment in nature-based solutions. So we have seen ecosystems through water-related ecosystem services perform an infrastructure-like function. Natural water infrastructure, including forest, aquifers, wetlands, provide water storage, water filter services, transportation, floodplains and wetlands, lower flood peaks in downstream cities, while coral reefs and islands protect coasts against storm and inundation. Although governments in the region have been recognizing the role of nature-based solutions, and it has been included in a lot of agreements and nationally determined action on climate change, but it still remains a big gap in terms of application of nature-based solution at a scales and integrating it sufficiently into the policy process and generating investment for nature-based solutions. So I think these three things that I would really like to emphasize from based on our work and experience is the role of legal process and agreements in coordinating sustainable management of the water resources and river basins, and increasing investment in WIFI nexus and nature-based solution for long-term conservation and maximizing the services that the water and river basins are providing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha, and thank you for highlighting how changing land use patterns are degrading and making wetlands more scarcer, and highlighting the role of political will and proper stringent policies and laws, how important these are as far as the SDG 6 is concerned. Thank you so much. Dr. Kumar, governments and international agencies, etc., are doing a lot for SDG 6 acceleration. Can you please highlight some more nudges? Already people have been spoken, the speakers have spoken about it, but we want some closing remarks from you. What are the nudges that we need, in this sector?
Yes, undoubtedly, government and agencies like your UN, international organization, donor, and other agencies have a strong commitment to the SDG. But it is the people's participation that make all the difference. Engagement with partner organization is vital for the tangible result on the ground. And it is not just a top-down, but also a bottom-up approach by sensitizing, incentivizing, and galvanizing stakeholders. We have to bring commitments for communities, civil societies, state agencies, because water in India is a state subject, together for the integrated cross-sectoral participation through cooperation, coordination, and convergence. With all these tremendous efforts, a little more nudge is needed to invest in educate infrastructure, adopt a circularity-wise approach, elicit international cooperation to encourage efficiency, support treatment technologies, and protect and restore water-related ecosystems. I strongly feel that at this critical juncture, there is a dire need to redesign the sectoral interventions, which should revet our ecosystems. For freshwater is the backbone of economic system and environmental values creation. Therefore, require close cooperation within the basins along supply chains, as well as among sectors and the countries as well. But we have to understand we have an optimized and coordinated planning, policy, regulation, and financing processes for these linkages. We have to see how successful we at basin level planning and to enhance disaster risk reduction, climate risk reduction, to manage water bodies in an integrated manner, gender sensitive, participative, and inclusive manner. So optimize financing, improve data and information, enhance capacity, innovations, and enhance governance. When all of it comes together, it is transversality approach. Actually, this is the transversality one now. These accelerators need to be filled with actions by actors and together with the other sector for complete water security. Thank you very much.
Open their cameras so we can have a screenshot of all the speakers before I sum up the discussion. All the speakers, please. Mr. Boroto, Mr. Jha, Mr. Tripathi. Mr. Tripathi, are you there? I think we lost him somehow in between. So we will have a quick selfie now, and then I'll just sum up with the discussion. So thank you so much. Thank you. And I'll just sum up with
I think you're muted, Shweta.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Sorry. Yes. So we need to adopt and promote a water systems partnership, which has come out as, when throughout the discussions which have been happening, I think this is what is important is that we need to have a systems approach to water partnerships to overcome challenges through solutions that are beneficial for all. Because partnerships in a development context, especially in the water sector, can be lot like a fictional potluck gone wrong. Everyone doing what they do best in the same space, but unless they plan to a level that might be considered excessive, the outcome will still be delivered in piecemeal and leave you hungry. So, 2023 has also been declared the year of accelerating change through partnerships and cooperation. It has assumed that collaboration between the water sector and actors outside the community, like the financial sector, private sector, energy sector, agricultural sector, will lead to more comprehensive holistic solutions that can be achieved and the needed monumental gains. Partnerships, announcements of them, celebrations of them will be front and center at the UN 23 Water Conference. Business as usual will not get us where we need to go. The crux of all discussions that we engaged in is that partnerships, if approached fully with the right set of metrics in place in a collaborative manner, can be a game changer we seek. Thank you, Excellencies, dignitaries, all the experts, speakers, and the audience who have joined from across the globe. From India Water Foundation and World Water Council, we are grateful for you for taking out your time from extremely busy schedule for us and gracing this event. And let's all meet at New York during the UN 23 Water Conference because all roads are leading to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Have a good